Hey, how's it going, everyone? Hopefully, you're staying safe and staying sane. This is Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role playing game and Fire in the Head Productions, my little tiny publishing company. So, wanted to do a video today. So, I've done some videos in the past. I haven't done one in, I don't know, like 3 days now. So, thought I would change things up a little bit. I've been doing like subjects that were, I don't know, sort of common, like kind of known ish things like game mechanic stuff, mostly about Savage Kingdoms and some setting material as well, the background material, which I consider actually more important. But today, I wanted to use some of my actor skills to show you guys how to do character voices. So I know there's a lot of this probably already on the internet. Um, but I thought I would try to add to it. So I'm an actor and a game designer, so that makes it perfect, and a game master. So that's a perfect coupling, I think, right there. So yeah, let's just dive right into it. So character voices, right? So this comes up a lot. So not every gamer is an entertainer, a performer, an actor, but every person is born with the ability to act because we do that every day. Now, that may not necessarily putting on a different voice, but um, a character's voice does come, at least from me, and a lot of actors will say this, it does come from inside. It does come from the character. We do what a lot of people do, what's called external acting, sort of putting on things and being all big and strong and all that. And that's fine if you want to do that. But if you really think about your character, where your character's from, and like the motivations, let that produce a voice in your head, how the person sounds like. Now, obviously, a lot of times we think, "Oh, characters sound really cool," like maybe Val Kilmer from Tombstone or whatever. And then in our head, and then when we actually say it, it's like "bum, ding, da, ding, ding," it doesn't come out correctly, and then everybody laughs at the table, and it becomes a big joke when you were trying to do something semi-serious. So yeah, we've all been there for that. Um, but more on that a little bit later. So let that be your motivation, as we say. Let it to be your interior act, your character come through and produce the voice. Also, you don't have to do a dialect or an accent. A lot of people think you have to do an accent. You don't necessarily have to do that. That's great if you can pull it off. There's kind of a rule in the professional acting industry, particularly in film as well. There's kind of an old saying that if you can't, as an actor, if you can't portray the accent with about 90% efficiency, then you shouldn't do one at all. And maybe that's a thing at the gaming table. I don't think it applies quite as much. I think you should make some effort. And here's why. So, not only is it fun to do a character voice or a character accent or a character dialect or a way of speaking, but to me, it also lets so not only is it fun and like character building and people can enjoy, kind of sliding into character, but it also cues the game master when you're actually talking in character when you're not without having to actually say that, which takes more time. So that's why I kind of prefer people to do at least something, some kind of something that's different from them, so they don't have to say every time their character talks. They don't have to say "I say" or "Morgan says" or it's fine if it's all you can do, but it saves a lot of time if you can literally, and that's another thing too. A lot of players, and this is fine. I do it myself probably too often too. Will say like he says or she says, and then but if you're doing the voice and you're really in the character, you don't really need to say he says, she says. You just say it as the character, and it becomes clear to the players at the table that that character's speaking, and that way you can command the audience a little bit, and you don't have to spend a lot of time with he says or she says or he speaks and says. You just do it. Now, if you aren't really good at distinguishing your voice and a character's voice, then yeah, you probably need to do the he said, she said, um, he speaks, she speaks. Um, you can even add a floor. He says with some concern instead of saying he says with some concern. Say it with concern, or she says this very excitedly. Then deliver it excitedly. Oh my God! I've got such great news. I don't want to share it with you. That was terrible. So, so there are different ways to do character voices. Like I said, you don't have to do an accent or a dialogue. dialects. One trick is to, and a lot of people are, and this is probably common sense, but it's to lower your register or to heighten your register. So using my normal voice right now, if I take it down a little bit, I could be a different character, and then you can kind of slow it up a little bit, maybe put a little bit of Southern on it, um, and suddenly you got this distinctive character. Or you can raise your voice up a little bit. Say, if I'm attempting to play a female character or a child, or even just a man with a higher voice. Higher voices also produce excitement. Like, oh, the mayor's in town, and I'm not. We're all gathering to the town square to see what's going. He's bringing things. He went to this strange region, and I think traded with some dwarves or something. And anyway, come see. He's out there right now. So that can produce excitement if you do a higher voice. Now you can still be excited with a lower voice, like the mayor's come to town and he's traded with some dwarves or something. We all need to come out there and see what's going on. So yeah, so you've already got a couple different characters right there. Another trick is to use your normal voice but speak in a different timbre, such as this, like William Shatner from Star Trek. In the old days, he was known to speak like this: Spock, I'm not sure. I'm responsible for the lives of 357 crewmen. Spock! So, maybe not quite to that degree. Although, if you're playing sort of a fun, lighthearted game, that would be great because that would probably, people would love it at the table. It probably wouldn't get super annoying. I mean, maybe a little after a while, and then you can learn to tone it down a little bit, perhaps. So to speak with a different meter is a way, or if you usually speak slower, kind of like this, this is sort of your normal pattern. And if you can try to speed it up and be much faster, don't worry about it if you mess up with your words. You just keep going, and then suddenly that's a character. He just kind of says whatever comes to his mind. He says, "Goes down the street, goes out that way, turns right. I don't know. There's a lake down there. There's a bunch of ducks sitting on the lake, and I just whatever." So if you mess up, it's fine. It's improv. Um, and I'll get to a little bit more of that in a second. So yeah, create excitement in your voice, or create sincerity and sadness. That's what needs to be done. If you need to take a pause, you take a pause. My God, you take a pause, and so and that's a storytelling technique. So if you're really going really fast, and I tend to talk a little fast when I'm game mastering. Sometimes I'm trying to get all this information out, and then you slow your pace. So you're like you're talking, even if it's just you talking as the game master or as the player. It's like yeah. So you go down the street and you see off in the distance, the end of the table, there's this, or in the end of the street, there's this big black and white marble building, and it just sits there brooding in the shadows, and you can see that the fires that once burned in front of the temple are no more. There's not even smoke. It's all quiet and desolate, and the statue of the god himself is just there in the shadows doing nothing. So it's very strange that this temple, once alive with activity, is suddenly just void of any humanity, any visitation, any divinity. So yeah, so lower your voice, change your pace to get it's a storytelling technique, and what that does is keeps the audience engaged, so they're not bored. Like if you talk at the same timbre all the time, especially if you're delivering things very informational like and very clinical, and you do this all the time. A lot of people do, and they're not aware of it. You can just kind of go on back and forth. I mean, if you got a 4 hour session, even a 3 hour session ahead of you, you rest assured your players will at some point dial out. Now they will at some point anyway. It's just human nature. You can only listen. I mean, the greatest entertainer can only go so long without people dialing out or checking their phone or whatever. It's just human nature. We got a bunch of other stuff going on, particularly nowadays. Um, but try to minimize that by switching up your timbre and your speech pattern and that sort of thing. So just a couple of little techniques there. Okay, so I'll go into there were a couple things I said I was going to go back to improv. I said more on that later, like a minute or so ago. So what that and a lot of people know about yes and that sort of used to be a secret with improvers, improvisers, improvisational actors almost, but now it's sort of mainstream. And what that simply means is yes, and you're adding to the scene. Somebody says, "Hey, Stephen, how's this going?" And you don't say, "I'm not Stephen." You inherit that you're Stephen. You might even put a last name on it. Yes, Stephen Anderson. I knew your father ever since we lived back in Indiana, and then the next person builds on the scene. That's called yes and. Another cool technique is yes but. And I might do another whole video about improv and like some game mastery stuff, but just really quick, as it pertains to character voices, yes, but is actually my favorite. You're accepting what was given, but you're kind of putting a twist on it. I actually find as a game master that's actually the best thing. Somebody asks around, I look around, are there any rocks laying on the ground? And the game master says, yes, but they're pretty heavy, so I'm not sure if you might be able to lift it. May need some help. Or yes, but they're pretty tiny. I'm not sure what you're going to do. You might could gather a bunch of them together or whatever. That may take you a minute or two. So that's yes, but. And the reason I bring it up with voice acting is that if you mess, like I kind of said in that little ramble, if you mess up as the character, and that's exactly what I meant to say, when you mess up as the character, if you mess up as the actor, as the gamer, as the performer, then just accept it as the character. You could be playing what you think in your mind is the most precise character, very educated, and never would mince his words, and then he minces his words. Just do it. Just go with it instead of like. I mean, sometimes we have to back out of what we say. I've done that several times because it's pertinent. You have an NPC say something that is completely true for whatever reason it came out of your head wrong, and then you have to say, and then you might have to back out and go, "Oh, sorry guys, that was actually wrong information he actually said." Or you could just have the character mess up in character and then correct himself in character. That's what I prefer to do. Someone says, a character says, is asked, are there any merchants in town? And he says, well, merchants in town, I'm not entirely sure. Oh, wait a minute. I was at the market yesterday, and there was a man from Larenthia, from the Larenthian Empire, across the river, and he had all sorts of goods, and he was charging quite a number of gold pieces. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant silver coins. Gold would be quite a bit. I don't think any of us have quite enough money in this region for such things, but anyway, his wares were, yes, they were quite impressive and didn't require gold usually, I should think. Silver coins would probably be fine, perhaps even bronze or copper. So anyway, so the merchant screwed up, said gold, probably a bad example, particularly if you play in D&D where gold is prominent. But anyway, that's how he corrected it in character and made it kind of a moment. It was kind of funny maybe, and it kind of built that character a little bit more to being sort of perhaps kind of a rambling, sort of mistake driven. Oh, I'm so sorry, I messed up, good sir. That sort of character, which is always kind of fun as an NPC. You don't want too many of those. You don't want all your NPCs being like that, as a side note. Or should they not all be strong and domineering and never afraid of anything? Because that gets annoying as well. Because the characters are trying to be heroic. So accents and dialects. So those generally mean the same thing. I know in the entertainment industry, we typically use the term dialect instead of accent, but a lot of people say accent. It's really kind of the same. There's actually subtle differences between the two, but that doesn't really matter. So an accent or a dialect. So I suppose the best one to start with is High British. So this is a High British accent. It's delivered more at the sort of the tip of the tongue. Actually, it sort of flows. The biggest thing I've learned at doing a British accent when performing character is don't linger on the word. So you don't linger on the word. You get off the word very quickly for the most part. So for example, the word as we would say raspberry. Uh, in most English dialects, not all of them, in most of them, you would say raspberry, raspberry. And it might sound like you're saying, what? What are you saying, raspberry? And no, you're actually saying your raspberry. You're saying raspberry. You're saying it very fast. You're getting off the word. Raspberry, library, Worcestershire. Anything that ends with shire is sure, because you're getting off the word, remember, very quickly. But it's all there. It's all packed in there. You just have to be dialed in, have to listen to the person. So this is High British. It would typically denotes a high educated character, a sort of a stereotype. Um, so if you're playing in a medieval fantasy setting, this might be a good noble, lots of nobles, perhaps even a well-bred merchant, a socialite of some sort. If it's another genre, say a Wild West genre, which is a game I'm actually working on, called the Mythic West. So this accent would fit to someone back east who's just come over the sea from jolly old England, probably a bit of a greenhorn. It's going about town still speaking like this, probably gets a bit of ridicule, but secretly he probably gets a lot of respect because he's probably well-to-do, or it seems to be, or well-bred and or well-educated. So, the locals might sort of make fun of you. You ain't been around here very long, have you, greenhorn? And, but behind that might be sort of in the shadows, maybe even to his face. But a lot of them are probably also thinking, man, that guy probably knows a lot. I probably need to, not maybe. I might need him at some point for, I don't know, to borrow money for this prospecting job I got coming up, or I don't know. He just might have some contacts back east, maybe New York, somewhere back there. So anyway, speaking of which, so that accent right there. So that was High English. The accent I just did there was kind of it was supposed to be a Western accent, more of but that was kind of generic Southern. The difference being, so I was born in North Carolina actually, and I lived in Georgia for a while, so I've always pretty much lived in the South. My accent, you might hear a little bit, but mostly it's kind of neutralized because as an actor, we try to sort of neutralize your accent, and then you pull out your accent when you need it, your native accent if you need it. So so even though I never really talked like this much of my life, I can bring it out if I have to because I've been around it. So, and this is probably more Georgia, uh, mountains of North Carolina where I live. Western North Carolina is a little bit more like this, kind of closed up. Got mountain folk, and the southern stereotype is to talk slow, but that's actually not necessarily true. In the mountains, they talk kind of fast. It's got a clip like this. Kind of hard. It's kind of hard to understand sometimes. And you could apply that to the Old West. It's not technically like a Western, like a Texan or a Kansas accent, but the cool thing about the Old West is that accents, everything was an amalgamation. Like people, it's a really fascinating part of history if you get a chance to study it, where a lot of things mishmashed, and so the accents were kind of different. You had people coming from the South trying to make their way in the Old West, in the New West, and the Western frontier, and then you had Midwesterners that were like from the like southern Midwest, like Missouri, and that's a slightly different accent as well. It's almost like kind of between Southeast and Texas. So just kind of fun things to play around with. And then you've got the old genteel Southern voice, like from Savannah, where everything sounds like molasses. This also applies to Louisiana. Louisiana accent like this. Now it's a little bit more run together, a little more like this. But if you're from Savannah and you're trying to play like someone from old school Savannah or Charleston, South Carolina, this might be the accent of choice. Like Val Kilmer in Tombstone. This is the second time I've brought him up. Well, Johnny Tyler, madcap, where are you going with that shotgun, boy? I'm your Huckleberry. Anyway, so that's kind of a southern accent, slightly different regions, different dialects, as it were. Um, So what's another one? Oh yeah, going back to the British. So there's High British, right? High the English, very sophisticated. You can roll your R's like I did, very, or you can just say very. Doesn't matter really, but very tends to make you talk faster. So if you want to sort of get off the words, you might say. And also the word can't, dance, uh, in most dialects of England is correct, but there are a few, particularly from the northern regions, and in Northumbria and that sort of thing, Yorkshire perhaps, they don't say can't and dance quite as much. It's almost can't and dance, almost like way Americans say it. So back to British. So that was High British, or High English. So sort of the opposite of that is Cockney. So everybody likes to this was Southern Rebecca. So everybody likes to do a Cockney accent, right? It's all down in the street. You can do a Dick Van Dyke version of it, which is, it's its own thing. It's not bad, but it's really not precisely accurate. Sort of like this one. Or it can be down it down there, down the streets, all that. Cockney accent, sometimes a bit hard to understand. Sort of rolls, also goes a bit fast. Hey, what are you doing there, eh? I don't know, whatever. So, so yeah, you just it's less educated, as a stereotype. Not necessarily always true, but in general. So yeah, it's all down the street, South London, and all that. So that's Cockney. Winning notes on Cockney. It's God, that one's hard to like really say. Whatever. I'm trying to say some notes right there. Cockney. Yeah, it's just a bit sloppy. It's just a bit sloppy. Just think about being it sloppy and all that. It don't have to be precise. It don't have to be that at all. So you can even do in between, sort of, sophisticated British. He's sort of sophisticated, and then maybe, it's sort of in between. He's kind of in between. He's a bit Cockney, but he's really not. That's probably more realistic, actually. Something like that. That might be a good, like Liverpool, Birmingham, sort of working class sort of city. Although Liverpool would have a bit of an Irish slant to it. Speaking of Irish, go right to that. So an Irish accent's more like this. Savage Kingdoms is to be a Gaelic accent, people from the Emerald Islands. Um, in High British, actually, that would be more an Eridonian accent, or perhaps a noble Brithian accent, Savage Kingdoms. Cockney is more, I save that more for down the streets. Oh, someone from the big city in Brithia. I don't use it much for Eridon unless it's like a farm, someone that's really sort of way away from civilization, all that. So yeah, Irish accent. So remember that an Irish accent sort of lilts back and forth. If you think about it being a song, that's the best way to do it. It's what's called a lilt. So do it as a lilt. The R's are typically pronounced R. Ireland, if you really want to totally nail it, you say Ireland. So it's almost like O-I, Ireland. You have to do it really fast or it sounds like Ireland like I just did. But instead of Ireland, you could do Ireland. It's Ireland. I'm from Ireland. I'm Irish. Or just Irish. It's fine. As long as you get the rest of it all right, it's well enough. So a lot of people confuse Irish with Scottish because, well, they're both Celtic languages. Um, the Irish were first, and then they migrated to Scotland, so that's why the accent's very similar. However, in Scotland, it's more like a brogue. So a lot of people like to do a Scottish accent, particularly down low and all that. But you can do it up high as well. There's Scottish women as well, and there's even a few Scottish men that perhaps talk with more of a lower register and all that. But so remember, it's more of a brogue instead of a lilt like iron. So it's a bit heartier, sort of to signify from being from the Highlands. Or if you're from lowland Scotland, I mean, you still have a bit of it. If you're from Glasgow, it's sort of neutralised a little bit, and it's almost a bit of English coming through, and you even hear a spot of Irish coming through, or more like this, sort of neutral. But if you're from the Highlands, you probably want to nail it. A lot of people use a Scottish accent for dwarves. That seems to be quite a thing to do. It goes all the way back to Lord of the Rings, probably even before, but I think Lord of the Rings is really the main reason for it. Gimli and all the dwarves talk for the most part in a Scottish brogue, and that works well enough. So before Lord of the Rings, though, I actually had my dwarves, or in Savage Kingdoms we call them Duergar. Um, they were actually talked more Nordish. I've even had a few that had an Austrian accent. I'll be back, sort of like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'll be back. But I didn't do it quite as deeply. So as a dwarf, I just as long as I bring it deep, like really down low, because remember, the dwarves represent the earth and fire, and you can make that voice rumble deep into your baritone or even into your bass, then you've probably done it. And it's all right to talk slow and concentrated because dwarves generally talk fairly precise, unless they're going back to the Scottish accent. But even then, you want to nail what you're saying, so that all your human lads and elf types are listening to you. Remember, and also you're talking probably through a heavy beard, so keep that in mind. So sometimes the dwarves are having a talk through their beards and all that sort of nonsense. All right, so that's Scottish slash possibly Dwarvish slash possibly Duergar. 23 minutes done. Actually, not so bad. Done several accents and showed you guys how to do some meters and differentiations and that sort of thing. Let's go to a Moldovan accent. So in Savage Kingdoms, there is a kingdom called Moldavia. And it's based on Romania, Transylvania, some sort of Slavic. Doesn't really matter. And by the way, none of these accents, I should have said this early on, are not supposed to be insulting to anyone to any culture or language. So just remember, Moldovan is like Russian accent, any Slavic accent, somewhat similar. You linger on the words and you do as I'm doing. It's hard to describe. You'll have to study this one perhaps a bit more unless you are from Russia or from Romania or that sort of thing. Da. So, da is yes, I think. Anyway, so that is Moldovan accent or Russian. It's easier to do a lower voice, especially as man. Is Boris? I'm just bringing name Boris von Glonovich. But it's not impossible to do his high voice as well, because there are women, and there will be perhaps a man with a higher voice or a child. So just think of that. So yes, just make it very rich, very low, and very somewhat mysterious. You'll be fine. There's also good accent for Gypsy. Savage Kingdoms, a lot of the Gypsy folk are from Moldavia. They are left out of the social structure because the nobles overattacks everyone, and that's what formed the Gypsy sort of subculture. So if you're playing a Gypsy, yes, yeah, da is always a good way to do a Romanian accent, since the Gypsies do come from the Romani people, which became Romania. So, all right, that's that accent. What's next, you say? That's a good question. So I have no idea. Oh no, I'm gonna do Spanish right after Moldonian. Right after, that's gonna be terrible because for some reason I screw those in my head. So this is Spanish accent, but of course, I'm Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. So that is a good way of doing Spanish accent, particularly Spaniard. So if you're trying to do a Mexican accent, is more like this and kind of goes back and forth, man. I don't know. And again, these accents are not meant to be insulting. These are just generic. We're just having fun. Um, so yeah, it's more like this. I don't know. My name is Pedro. And in Spanish, she's more like Inigo Montoya. Talks a bit fast, but there's as long as you put some accent on there, you'll be fine. Um, what's some things to remember when you're doing a Spanish accent? What's fun to do as a Spanish accent whenever you come across a J word and you say it like "ha," that's kind of fun. Um, things like that. Um, if you're just making up Spanish words, galamagos, or cancillo. I could always put a lot of O's and R's on it because that's feminine and masculine. It's a bit stereotypical, but that's kind of a way to sort of fake it if you have to. So that is a Spanish accent. And Mexican. Let's see, what else? What will be good? What's another accent? I can tell you really quickly without insulting everyone. Um, all right, well, again, none of these accents these are just stereotypes. So there is a way to do an Indian accent. So from East, this is terrible. Usually, I'm much better at it. I don't know what this is. See if I can get it. Uh, anyway, you could do that was terrible. I can't remember how to do an Indian accent. I haven't done one in a while. On stage actually to play an Indian guy, which is really weird with the makeup and stuff. I don't think it would fly anymore. This is like 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago. Um, Asian accents in general often are looked at today as kind of particularly, with the culture misappropriation going around. People are a little sensitive to it, and I understand. So just be careful if you're doing some of the Asian accents are like because there's a history of them being kind of insulting. And so anyway, if you have to do, like Japanese accent, the stereotype, Ichiro Yakazoshi. Just remember, have fun with it, and just remember that you're not insulting that culture. If you do have a player that's from Japan or India or whatever, either not do it, or if you know them really well and you know they're really cool and they also probably like to make fun of your accent as well, which would be perfect, then it's probably okay. But otherwise, maybe just stay away from it or take them to the side and say, hey, your characters are traveling through Japan or some equivalent of Japan in the Savage Kingdom setting. That would be Yanakan or even Taikanara. Just tell them that, I might be doing some NPC accents that sound kind of like that. And I don't mean to insult you. It's just, and it's probably so terrible anyway that nobody notices or cares or they just laugh about it. So just be mindful, in the real world. I know we're trying to inhabit characters and we're telling stories, but let's always be conscious of the real world of the people around us. Because I know I've probably broken into an accent or two and looked around the table and was like, oh man, that's might have been a little close to home. And I just told the person. I mean, it was always fine, at least so it seemed to be. So just be mindful of that. Um, I mean, and even like Caucasian European accents. If you're with a British person and you're sort of making fun almost of the high British, now mostly they'll sort of laugh at or they'll just think it's ridiculous. But yeah, so even then, just tell them that um, you're just playing a character, you're just trying an accent. So yeah, I think that's probably enough for now. We're not even quite at 30 minutes. I think that's perfect. So we did I did like 8 or 9 different accents. Hopefully you guys learned something from those. I also kind of showed you how to change your timbre a little bit, your speech pattern. So don't forget to pause if you need to, and don't sometimes go fast. Just go. And if you just rumble over some information, just go back and get it, or just don't worry about it because a lot of it will stick with the players. Oh yeah, one last accent I guess would be Brooklyn. Hey, whatever. So if you're from, man, and again, not any kind of insult from people from Jersey or yes, New York City or whatever. This is very generic. I don't. It's loosely Italian American, whatever. But I can also be Jewish American. Bring it down. I know I don't want to be insulting, but this is a good way to do it. So yeah, I kind of because I did the southern one, so I had to do sort of a northeastern one. That was just in my head as an afterthought. So there you go. Oh yeah. So the big difference between doing a Brooklyn accent, this is very difficult because I had to do like a Brooklyn character, and then suddenly I cast as like a guy from Boston. And then so it's you in some ways it sounds similar, but it's very different. The difference being is like, all right, so if you're from a Boston accent, particularly a Southie accent, can be a little bit like that Brooklyn. It's kind of down the streets, but not quite as bad. Big difference is O's are pronounced O and A is an I, like Margaret. So you've heard park the car and have a garage, a Margaret. But when you get to Tommy, it's not Tammy like it would be probably in New York. It's Tommy, Johnny. I swear to God, Margaret. So so if you can hit those, if you listen to listen to Seth MacFarlane, he won't steer you wrong. Listen to Ted. He'll say Donnie, Tommy, Johnny, Margaret. Yeah, I swear to God. I swear to God. I swear to God. So Brooklyn would be, hey, I swear to God. And Boston might be, I swear to God. I swear to God. So, all right. I think that's going to end it on that note. So thanks you guys for paying attention. And hopefully you learned some things, or at least were quasi entertained. And maybe I'll follow up and do another one with some different accents and or some different techniques and whatnot. So in the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, and I'll talk to you guys later.